Pay for you. How about that? How much?
The movie starts in a place called a drop bar. It looks like a regular bar, but gangs use it to clean their illegal money. The cash is moved in and out by secret couriers who deliver it to its final destination. The bar owners never know when their bar will be picked for a drop, which helps keep everything hidden. In one of these bars, we meet the main character, a bartender named Bob Saganowski. Bob is a quiet man with a dark past and a violent side that he keeps hidden behind his calm appearance. The bar where he works is managed by his cousin Marv, but actually belongs to the Chechen Mafia. Every night, a group of older regulars meet there to drink and chat. One evening, as they toast to their old friend Richie Whelan, who died mysteriously 10 years ago, Bob quietly serves them another round of drinks. Marv got angry at Bob and reminded him that the bar was a business, not a charity. He became even more upset when he learned that Bob had let an old woman drink for free and smoke inside while he was away. Bob believed he was just being kind, but in the end, he obeyed Marv. The audience finds out that Bob is a devoted Catholic who often attends church. One evening, while walking home, he heard crying sounds coming from a neighbor's trash bin. When he looked inside, he found a wounded pit bull that had been left to die. At that moment, the homeowner, Nadia, came outside to see who was near her house. Bob told Nadia what had happened and asked her to help the injured dog. Still cautious, she asked to see his ID and took photos of the dog to send to her friends, just to be safe. In the end, they brought the dog inside and treated its wounds. The dog had many cuts and bruises from abuse, but fortunately, none of the injuries were life-threatening. While they talked, Bob noticed bruises on Nadia's neck. She worked as a waitress and had experience rescuing animals. They both agreed that taking the dog to a shelter wasn't a good idea, especially because Bob had already grown attached to it. He persuaded Nadia to keep the dog for a few days until he could bring it home. Near the bar, two brothers were arguing nervously. They were planning to rob Marv's bar. The older brother was confident and said they needed to take risks to prove themselves to their boss. The younger brother, who was a drug addict, became terrified when he learned the bar was actually controlled by the Chechen Mafia. In the end, the older brother convinced him to go through with the plan. The scene then shifts to the bar, where two masked men show up just before closing time. They point their guns and force Marv to put the money into a bag. Marv stays calm and warns them that they're robbing the wrong people, but he still has no choice but to do what they say. During the robbery, Bob noticed that one of the men was wearing a broken watch. After the robbery ended, they found Randy, a bar employee, beaten to death in the backyard. Soon after, Detective Torres arrived to investigate. He recognized Bob from church, where they had seen each other for years but had never spoken. During the investigation, Bob didn't have much information because the robbers were wearing masks. He did mention that one of them had a broken watch stopped at 6:15. The robbers had stolen about $5,000. Besides the case, Detective Torres became curious about why Bob never took communion at church, although Bob initially denied it. When Torres pressed him for answers, Bob denied everything. In truth, he felt ashamed of his past and avoided communion so he wouldn't have to confess. Meanwhile, Marv became angry after finding out that Bob had mentioned the broken watch, worried it might upset the Chechens. Later, Bob brought the puppy home and asked Nadia to go with him to the pet store since he had never owned a dog before. Nadia helped him choose bowls, a leash, waste bags, and a care guide. Bob suggested naming the dog Rocco, though he personally liked the name Mike. Nadia preferred Rocco, saying Mike wasn't a good name for a dog. They made a name tag for Rocco, although Bob still thought Mike was a better name. Later, after they finished shopping, Bob drove Nadia home, unaware that a thug named Eric Deeds was secretly watching them from afar. One morning, while the cousins were shoveling snow in the backyard, Chavka, the Chechen Mafia boss and the real owner of the bar, arrived. He told them that he had caught one of the robbers. The man had been gagged, tortured, and had his foot nailed and bolted to the floor of a van. Chavka asked Marv and Bob if they knew the man, but both said they didn't. He then demanded to know how the police had found out about the broken watch, and Bob had to apologize. Before leaving, Chavka ordered Marv to find the stolen money. Marv felt the pressure, realizing that Chavka might think he was part of the robbery and knew how to get the money back. During the investigation, Detective Torres discovered that Marv had lost the bar to Papa Umarov, Chavka's father and a Chechen Mafia boss, 10 years ago. Torres talked about it with a colleague from the major crime unit and asked if they planned to go after Papa. His colleagues said the mafia was too powerful to take down and joked that Torres could try prosecuting them himself. Bob loved having Rocco as his companion, but as a first-time dog owner, he had trouble keeping things clean. Rocco often peed around the house, and Bob had to keep cleaning up after him. One morning at the dog park, while playing with Rocco, Bob ran into Nadia, who was exercising nearby. She had just lost her night shift job and offered to help take care of Rocco to earn some extra money. Bob, who was attracted to Nadia, agreed to her offer and they exchanged contact information. Soon after, Eric Deeds appeared and complimented Bob's dog. Feeling uneasy around him, Bob quickly left with Rocco. Meanwhile, Marv lived with his sister Dottie, and their father was in a nursing home, brain dead and kept alive by machines. The siblings discussed their father's condition. Dottie, tired of the high cost of care, suggested ending his life so they could live freely and maybe travel to Europe. Marv disagreed, saying they should stay loyal to their father, even if it meant sacrificing their own comfort. Later, Marv met Fitz, one of the robbers, and confronted him about the crime. He blamed Fitz for his brother's mistake with the broken watch and for beating Randy so badly that Marv had to call an ambulance and involve the police. Marv warned that their bar was now in danger and told Fitz to make sure the next robbery went more smoothly. Elsewhere, a suspicious man in a car stopped to ask Marv for directions to the hospital. Marv gave him the directions but stayed alert. Meanwhile, at Bob's house, he was talking to Rocco and apologizing for not taking him outside. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was Eric, who rudely walked right in. Eric asked about the dog, leaving Bob confused. He claimed that Rocco was his, but Bob disagreed. Eric then said that if Bob really owned the dog, he should have the chip number and legal papers. He explained that the chip was implanted under the dog's skin to identify its true owner. Eric showed the chip's serial number, claiming he was the real owner. Bob refused to give up the dog, reminding Eric that he had abused it. Eric then threatened to call the police. When Bob asked what he really wanted, Eric gave vague answers, made small talk about the weather, took Bob's umbrella, and left. Bob and Nadia grew closer because of Rocco. At a calf, Nadia told Bob he was the first person who never asked about the bruises on her neck. Bob said it wasn't his place to pry. Eventually, Nadia opened up about her troubled past. While high on drugs, Nadia once slit her throat with a potato peeler, hating her addiction and wanting to die. She survived and began rebuilding her life. Meanwhile, at the bar, Marv told Bob he was scared of the strange man who had asked for directions and feared for his safety. Marv was still haunted by losing the bar to Chavka Umarov 10 years earlier, and his self-hatred consumed him. One day, Bob was shocked to find a severed hand and a blood-stained bill in a trash bag. The stolen money had been returned, along with the robber's broken watch and hand. They were confused, unsure who had returned the money or why. Bob carried the severed hand into the bar and wrapped it expertly, surprising Marv with how natural he seemed, as if he'd done it before. Suddenly, Eric walked in. They had forgotten to lock the door. Marv told Eric the bar was closed and tried to send him away. When Bob appeared, Eric just greeted him and left, still suspicious. Marv grew uneasy about Bob's connection to Eric, and when Bob explained that Eric claimed to own Rocco, Marv became even more concerned. Eric turned out to be a local thug rumored to have killed Richie Whalen, the man they toasted at the beginning of the film. Marv told Bob that Eric had spent time in prison and a mental hospital, warning him to stay away. Bob, however, seemed more surprised than afraid. Bob placed the severed hand in a cloth bag and left. After he was gone, Marv broke down crying and began cleaning the blood off the money to return it to the Chechens. Meanwhile, Bob played with Rocco and threw the wrapped hand into the river. Detective Torres later approached and asked if he knew Eric Deeds, but Bob denied it. The Chechens then came to collect the stolen money, and Chavka announced the bar would be the drop site on Super Bowl night. Around the same time, Eric confronted Bob, asking about Nadia and whether she had hurt herself recently. Soon after, Bob questioned Nadia about her past with Eric. Frightened by the investigation, Nadia ran off, leaving Bob confused. Meanwhile, Marv met Fitz, who asked for a ride. Shaken by his brother's death, Fitz nervously checked Marv's trunk for plastic lining and pulled out a gun. But when Marv opened the trunk, it was completely empty. Fitz relaxed and got into the car to leave. Marv suggested robbing the bar on Super Bowl night when a lot of cash would be there, but Fitz refused, saying he just wanted to stay alive. Marv told him to get out, then suddenly rammed into him repeatedly, killing him instantly. Marv left, switched cars, and drove off. Later, Bob and Nadia reconciled, and she apologized for her earlier behavior. She admitted she had dated Eric, who first seemed kind but later turned violent, so she left him. Nadia warned Bob that Eric had killed Richie Whalen, but Bob already knew. Later, Marv met Eric at a diner and said Bob was afraid of him. Eric replied that he wanted Bob's respect or there'd be trouble. Marv assured him he had a plan that would benefit everyone. Marv had planned to use Fitz for the Super Bowl heist instead of Eric, hoping to keep Eric distracted and away from Bob. Meanwhile, Detective Torres met an old colleague and got Eric's psychiatric file, noticing something unusual. At home, Bob called for Rocco but got no answer. He found the dog safe in a wooden crate, along with his umbrella, proving Eric had been there. Bob confronted Eric, warned him to stay away, and refused to give Rocco back. Eric demanded $10,000 for the dog, but Bob said it was too much. Later, Marv told Bob he wouldn't be at the bar during the Super Bowl. Bob suspected Marv was planning a reckless scheme they couldn't pull off. Still bitter about losing the bar to Chavka, Marv grew angry and paranoid, thinking Bob had given his old stool to an elderly woman to humiliate him. Bob explained it was just an ordinary stool. At the bar, Bob hid $10,000, Rocco, and a gun in the basement. Meanwhile, Eric broke into Nadia's home and forced her to go with him to Marv's bar. She resisted but eventually agreed to avoid provoking him. That night, they arrived together, leaving Bob disappointed and Nadia ashamed. Marv called Eric, but he was already at the bar after hearing the noise. Marv warned him not to underestimate Bob, saying he might seem quiet but was unpredictable. Then Marv lined his trunk with plastic, drove to the bar, and parked 2 blocks away to watch as various mafia crews arrived throughout the night to drop off money. Finally, the bar was empty, except for Eric and Nadia. Before stepping out for a cigarette, Eric handed her a gun. In tears, Nadia warned Bob that Eric planned to kill him. Bob offered to pay for Rocco, but Eric cruelly asked how much Nadia was worth and told him to lock the money in the safe. Bob refused and revealed that he, not Eric, had killed Richie Whalen. He explained that Marv was a gambling addict, and Richie was just one of many who owed him money. Even after Richie repaid his debt with casino winnings, Marv wanted more. To hide that Marv had already been paid, Bob shot Richie twice in the face. Then told Nadia she was safe and free to leave. The Chechens later disposed of Eric's body, and Chavka gave the bar to Bob, renaming it Bob's Bar. Outside, Marv was killed, and Detective Torres arrived to investigate. He mentioned the church's upcoming sale and suspected Bob's involvement in Richie Whelan's murder and Eric's disappearance. Later, Bob brought Rocco to Nadia's house, apologized for his past, and said he killed Eric to prevent future blackmail. Nadia felt both fear and affection for him, and they agreed to start seeing each other.